is a senior scientist at the CERN, Geneva, Switzerland. CERN is the European Organization for Nuclear Research. The name CERN is derived from the acronym of the French acronym. I have a difficulties in pronouncing this French word. So I welcome you, ma'am, and we are very grateful for agreeing to deliver today's lecture. As we all know that all speakers are internationally well known and therefore does not need any introduction. Also, you all must have seen her very short CV on the website and Facebook provided by us. However, I would like to personally speak on Dr. Archana Sharma with a few lines. So we can see here Dr. Sharma actively joined the research since 1989. Internationally well known for the excellent contribution in instrumentation. Almost all experiments, big or small, not have been successful without her contribution. With these few words, I would like to humbly request Dr. Archana Sharma ma'am, please deliver her lecture on blue sky research, coronavirus, and why you should care. Dr. Archana ma'am, please. Ma'am.
Hello, namaskar. I hope you can hear me. Everyone can hear me?
Sure, ma'am.
जी, तो नमस्कार और बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद इस अवसर के लिए. So I know Venkatesh ji from the time, from a very long time, in fact, since he was a student probably. And we are also connected because I did my master's from Banaras Hindu University. So I'm extremely glad and proud to meet on this platform again, and also to share the little I have learned over the years with you and the rest of the team that you have here. We hope that this will be also a good discussion at the end, because I chose this topic simply because we are all challenged in this time. और इस वक्त बहुत ज़रूरी है कि हम सब सोचें कि हम किस तरह से आगे बढ़ें और किस तरह से ब्लू स्काई रिसर्च जो है, जिसका मतलब यही होता है कि देयर इज़ नो डायरेक्ट इम्पैक्ट, देयर इज़ नो डायरेक्ट रिटर्न ऑफ इन्वेस्टमेंट अगर हम बोलें, तो उसके लिए जस्ट फॉर द सर्च ऑफ नॉलेज, जस्ट फॉर द सेक ऑफ नॉलेज हम क्या कर सकते हैं और किस तरह से हम उसको एक इम्पैक्टफुल और मीनिंगफुल रिसर्च कर सकते हैं. So on this slide, I show you the pictures of many eminent scientists from India, and I'm sure you recognize all of them. And you also know that they have been in quest for answers to many questions. Something like, what is the world made of? Where did we come from? Is there another universe? And all of them have made a very big impact towards the body of knowledge of science, not only in India, but also internationally. As you all have studied in your classes about the Raman effect and the Saha equation, the Baba scattering, and so on. I will not go in detail here. Now, a few of the Nobel Prize winners at CERN, where I work, and it's a European Center for Nuclear Research. In the olden days, it was nuclear research. Nowadays, it's called high energy physics, or it's also called particle physics. So it's essentially curiosity-driven blue sky research, again, in search of answers to question and what kind of impact we can make to mankind. And clearly, science is a continuous progression of knowledge. And that continues when we are standing and we realize and we acknowledge that we are standing on the shoulders of giants. And these are the giants that could come up with extremely impactful ideas because they were thinking and because they were curiosity driven. They were not ROI driven. And all of you know the famous story of Isaac Newton and his apple and the theory of gravitation and so on. And this, of course, is seminal to what we study now. The Newton's laws of motion And of course, all that the planetary motions and the discoveries that we do in cosmology, the studies we do in astronomy, everything has been impacted by what he studied and what he has given us in terms of an understanding of gravitational waves, black holes, and how the universe essentially works. Similarly, you studied the Maxwell's equations, you heard about William Hertz, and I'm sure, like me, I was very confused when I studied the Maxwell's equation, believe me. And this was my period in Women's College in Banaras Hindu University, where the teacher beautifully derived these equations and then solved them. And it was impossible for me to understand what is the connection with the real world. And this is the learning that we have had over time. And the goal really is now that students and teachers, in fact, take new techniques of teaching so that we are able to impact the students armed with an understanding of the impact of what is studied in class. So this was a big learning for me, of course, in the university. And as we go along gently forward, we understand what is the electromagnetic nature of light. And this was in the 1850s. And of course, we cannot go speaking about giants before we speak of the giant of giants, who is Einstein, who had given us so many things that it will need another lecture just to speak about Einstein. But you all are very well aware that relativity, for example, is not just an abstract mathematical theory when you derive this on the boards, but it is absolutely essential for the GPS system that we are also getting so used to working even in our cars when we are driving or whenever we are traveling. We need the Google Maps and we need the GPS to be working. So I was just thinking, how long would it take me if I started from Varanasi and I come to your place and it tells me it's 5 hours and 50 minutes. And if it was not corrected by relativity, I would be off by at least 50 kilometers. Now I will let you scratch a bit your head on thinking how this is possible. So these are the kind of implications that blue sky research brings about. And of course, Einstein was not thinking about a global positioning system. He was thinking, how can I connect the dots? How can I look at motion? How can I look at quantum theories that also, are also we teach and we learn in school and college? And those theories and those concepts are now used for financial and risk analyses. For example, here you see the New York Stock Exchange, and what they actually apply are algorithms that are derived from the Brownian motion for which Einstein got the Nobel Prize. So yes, now this is something really bizarre in the sense that when we speak about quantum mechanics and we speak about Bose-Einstein statistics and we speak about fermions and we speak about bosons, it's quite interesting. So imagine a train. This is a local train in Bombay. It's quite bizarre, as you can see. And it is stuffed with people, right? Always. Can I put another person in there? I do not think so. It's very difficult, isn't it? But can I put a ghost over there? एक भूत को तो बीच में डाल सकते हैं ना, बहुत सारे आ सकते हैं उसके अंदर. तो उसी तरह से जो fundamental particles हैं, you know that they are divided into fermions and bosons. And the Bose-Einstein statistics, which both Satyendranath Bose and Albert Einstein stated and hypothesized, actually describes the whole universe. And this is a mind-boggling theory, which when understood, we can create how these are my little ghosts I have made on the screen, as you see, which can enter anywhere, not the humans, of course. And if we add more photons together, what does it mean? It means that photons can be added, but you cannot put fermions together, right? They will acquire a particular state, and that's how you make your atoms. But if you put photons or bosons together, you can actually make lasers. So really, in short, you can imagine that we have got so much from blue sky research. The X-rays, when you go to the hospital, you do not imagine that there is no way how I can look inside my bones if they are broken. We just assume that in the hospital there's somebody who will look after me and will exactly find out where my bones are broken and will fix it. But where did this come from? Where did the X-rays come from? They came from the laboratory of somebody who was driven by curiosity, right? Similarly, antimatter. You all know about antimatter, and you know that PET scanners are made out of antimatter. I will come to that later on. And so on. I will not list everything, but you clearly get the picture that when a quest is done without looking at the immediate benefit to mankind, and I cannot refrain from mentioning the World Wide Web, which came about just as a necessity for particle physicists at CERN to share data. And again, I will tell you the story about Sir Tim Berners-Lee. Now, talking of quantum mechanics and electrons and photons, could we ever think that the electron microscope will be able to tell us the detail, in vivo detail of the coronavirus? It's a very intriguing story, isn't it? Because with photons, we are able to only go to 200 nanometers in terms of the resolution when we look under the microscope. However, when you use an electron microscope, you are able to do better than 50 picometers. So that really gives us a handle on how we understand, in this particular case, the COVID-19 virus. And of course, this first 3D map of the coronavirus protein opens the doors to vaccines. So where the dots connect, we do not know. And this is why blue sky research is incredibly important to be followed. So I think this picture is well known to all of you, which is of course the macroscopic and the microscopic pictures. And when we look at the microscopic part of the picture, which means that we move from the atoms into the nucleus, into the hadrons that make up the nucleus, which are the quarks and the leptons. The leptons are not the hadrons, obviously. But the point being that when we, what was I going to say? Yes, I wanted to say that we have understood the current constituents of matter. But then what does it tell us? It tells us, and how did we come to know all these things? So we have been smashing matter, right? So we have been smashing matter to be able to understand how atoms are created. So let's do the same thing that people have been doing from millennia nearly. And also recently, if you look here in this corner, these are early experiments with cosmic rays. And they were done by teams from the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in Hyderabad. And what you see here are balloons that are going up, which will be then bombarded by cosmic rays, and those collisions can then be studied by photographic means. And those were the very early particle physics experiments. So let's look at this collision energy, and then it collides. What happens? These are not the basic constituents. This is obvious, isn't it? A kid plays with Lego all the time, and these are Lego helicopters, which are somehow simulating the cosmic rays that will bombard the molecules of gas in a balloon, for example. It's an example, because these things happen all the time. We are being showered by particles all the time, and we have these interactions ongoing in our bodies, in the atmosphere, everywhere, all the time. We just do not have the correct cameras to take the pictures. So increasing the energy, we went to the smallest constituents. And how did we do that? We increased the collision energy. And cosmic rays have a range of energy, right? So by studying the cosmic rays, we have been able to understand how we can build the atoms. Once we have understood what are the smallest constituents, we tried to put those Lego pieces together, and we were able to piece the picture of matter by calling them protons, neutrons, and electrons. And when we build the atoms, you see, together, we knew now how to make an atom. How to make a helium atom, which of course the proton has the up quark and the down quark, and of course the electron. And if we keep going and we keep doing this over and over and over again and again and again, we will be able to reproduce the whole universe, isn't it? So it means that now we have understood everything, isn't it? So this is fantastic. And by studying fundamental science, understanding matter, understanding the properties of matter, understanding the forces, we have been able to have an extremely important impact on mankind. I think this is something that you all agree and you all do not need to be convinced of, right? So the fundamental forces of nature are the four forces. We all know about gravity, that even if in this room that I'm sitting, if we close the doors and we make a vacuum inside, even then gravity will exist, right? So we know that there is this fundamental force which exists everywhere, and that's gravity. We know electromagnetism, that's how our atoms are made, as you know. We have the strong nuclear force because it holds the nuclei together, even though the protons are positively charged, they do not fly away. So this is the strong nuclear force. The weak nuclear force gives us radioactivity, as you know. In the center of the sun, we have a lot of these radioactive reactions going on, and this is why we have the light and we have the daylight coming from the sun, which also gives us our day and night. So overall, I think the picture of the universe is pretty nice and pretty clear. However, there is something missing. There are many questions that are still open. So let's take a quick recap. So the Big Bang Theory, I'm sure all of you have heard about. And at the time of the Big Bang, the temperatures were very, very high and the energies were very, very high. And of course, everything was collapsed into a single point of a needle. Now, as the universe expanded, you know that there was something like a soup of particles, you know, just like we make a soup at home. When I was young, my mother used to make for me some soup, and I had to try to imagine what did she put in over there. So that's exactly what we are trying to do. We are trying to understand what are the constituents of this cosmic soup. However, the phase of this soup we do not know. We do not know what is the structure of that soup. We do not know what is the state of matter of this soup. It's not solid, it's not liquid, it's not a gas like we know, it's something else. So you can imagine that there were kinds of particles that were there all the time, and they were changing in between each other. And also there were mechanisms where the forces came to be. So all that happened at this period of time when very gently, after 3 minutes only, we started to get some atoms, right? So that's the process that we want to understand in what we call blue sky research, in which I am also involved. And we know we are starting from this side. If we look on the right-hand side, we know that we are sitting here and we are thinking how this whole thing has happened, how the universe around us has come about. And of course, there are clues everywhere, how the universe moves, how gravity affects, and so on. So we have been able to piece things together. Still, the picture is not complete. So what are the open questions? The open questions are, why is there mass at all? Why is a proton so heavy? How did it acquire that mass? Now, there is another mystery that's going on, which is that we see only 5% of the universe that should be there. 95% is missing. We do not understand where is that. Is it dark matter, dark energy? We have no idea. Similarly, why at all are we here? We are here because we are made of matter, right? But then there should have been equal amount of antimatter created at the time of the Big Bang. And both matter and antimatter should have annihilated, and we should not have been there. So what is this mystery about the asymmetry between matter and antimatter? So all these things we need to continue the quest. And of course, the implications of this quest will impact billions of lives, as you have seen already. So yes, let's continue our thinking and understand the structure of matter further. So here what you see in this table is a nice collection of the particles of the basic constituents, just like we know about the atoms and the molecules and so on. Now we know that the basic particles are of two types, fermions and gauge bosons, let's not complicate. And these fermions come in 6 basic types, which are the up quark, charm quark, top quark, down, strange, and bottom. And they come in another variety, which are called the leptons, which are the electron, muon, taus, and the neutrinos, which are really the ghost particles, which are everywhere and we can't see them. And of course, the forces that are manifest are, as we said, the weak force, electromagnetic force, and the strong force. And these forces can happen only because of the bosons. So the bosons are carriers of these forces. So there is an equation on this cup that you see on your left. And this is one equation that describes our universe. Okay, I will not go in the detail there, but I will encourage you to take a look and Google up these days, as you know, that what's hiding underneath over here on the right-hand corner. So that has been postulated to be a Higgs boson. And the Higgs is responsible, the Higgs mechanism is responsible to give mass to all these particles, all right? So how do we know that, by the way? So in 1964, there were scientists who had proposed a theory that's now called the Brout-Englert-Higgs field, which is invisible, but it gives mass to other particles, all right? Now, if it is invisible, how can we prove that it exists? It's very, very difficult, isn't it? And this was proposed in 1964. Many of you were probably not even born then, but these gentlemen had been working and trying to make equations which can then spin out these particles, and they could predict that there should be a Higgs boson and the mechanism by which mass is coming. So how can we produce this Higgs boson in the laboratory? Or can we produce it, first of all? We know from Einstein, as you know, that E is equal to mc squared. All of you know that, right? So let's try to do an experiment where we increase the energy beyond what we know is the mass, or let's say around the expected mass of the Higgs boson. So what happened here? We were expecting little Lego pieces, but Lego pieces did not come out. Something else has come out here, right? And this is completely unexpected, right? So we could be able to make particles from energy. And that is again given to us from Einstein and Einstein's theory and the other scientists, of course. So let's go further. Let us create an accelerator, which may be able to give us those particles that do not exist anymore, but existed at the time of the Big Bang. So let's see, yes, let's try to make our particle accelerator. And we want to recreate the Big Bang by having two beams of protons, billions and billions of protons, of course, to very, very high energy. We accelerate them and then we collide them in the hope that we might create highly expected particles, you know, the protons or the quarks and the gluons and so on, all the expected particles that are there in the universe, and we know about them. Just like in the picture here, you can see the cartoon, there are cats and dogs and horses and rabbits that we know about, but there are things we do not know. And those are the things we want to study. And if we are lucky, we will be able to find our big Higgs boson created in the laboratory, right? So this Higgs boson is supposed to be very heavy. Compared to the proton, it's 100 times more than the mass of the proton. And we did not even know the exact mass when the LHC was being designed. In addition, it's very rare. That's another pain, because how do you find something that is very rare? It's like finding 1 grain of gold in all the beach of Goa, all right? So in addition, the Higgs boson doesn't stay there saying, oh, take a picture, I'm here. It decays instantly, and we have to catch and detect whatever is coming out and reconstruct that indeed it comes from a Higgs boson. So these are the challenges that you can imagine. Nevertheless, despite all these difficulties, we found it. And how did we do it? We need many things, of course. And let me start backwards. We need a large collaboration. We need expertise where thousands and thousands of engineers, scientists, technicians, and also a lot of students who can help to design, build, operate, and study these very complex machines, which are called accelerators. These are the powerful machines you have heard of that accelerate particles to very high energies and bring them into collisions. And once the collision happens, we need something to take pictures of these collisions so that we do not miss out any information that's coming out. You remember E is equal to mc squared? So E is what we put in and M is what we measure. So they have to be equal. We cannot be missing out on energy, right? Or we cannot be missing out on particles that are going in the cracks of these detectors. So we need to have a photographic memory of all the particles that are moving out from the collision point. To do that, we need a huge amount of computing. First of all, not to collect everything that's coming out, because we need to have a smart algorithm to just keep what we need. Otherwise, the data produced is incredibly large and very difficult to manage. So here is a picture that shows you Geneva, Switzerland. And if you look here, this is the airport here of Geneva. And let me see, if you look carefully, I am sitting somewhere here. That's my home here somewhere. And of course, you see two small beads moving around, which represent the two directions of the proton accelerator, 100 meters underground on this surface. On the top, you see the mountains. Maybe you do see the mountains. They are the Alps, Swiss Alps, that we get to see time to time in the movies also. But what we do not know, that the beautiful Swiss countryside has underground, straddling France and Switzerland, this big accelerator. And in this accelerator, of course, this is a super microscope. Inside the tunnel, that's what it will look like. You see two beams. These are the two beam pipes, actually. So you will see the beams that are going in one direction and in the other direction if we were to sit inside these beams, and then they are made to collide at very, very, very high energies, 70 eV on 70 eV. So this is a discovery machine. It is extraordinary. It works on superconducting temperatures, which is 1.9 Kelvin above zero, which you cannot imagine the challenge, the engineering challenge, right? The vacuum needed is incredible. And then, of course, we are creating temperatures and radiation in there, which is 1 billion times more than in the center of the sun. So the engineering challenge is incredible, and you can already start connecting the dots in your mind on how these engineering spin-offs can give an impact to society. And we will not speak too much about that right now. On the Large Hadron Collider, as it is called, hadron is just another name for protons. In this particular case, it could be other particles. So that's underground. And on the surface, there are 4 experiments that are placed at strategic points around this collider. And protons are colliding, and we are trying to look at the collisions. So if you look very carefully here, where you see my cursor, you see a tiny, tiny person here. So this whole experiment is something like a 6-storied building, or something like a ship, a very big ship, right? And on the right-hand side, you see a second experiment to which I belong, and I work on this. It's called Compact Muon Solenoid, CMS. It looks like a very huge cylindrical onion. Imagine that. And every layer of this onion has cells like mobile cameras, which are taking pictures of the collisions 40 million times a second, right? Now, why are there these 2 experiments? Because if we declare that we have seen the Higgs, then using other kind of technologies in the ATLAS experiment, they should also be able to see that, simply because nature it doesn't differentiate between ATLAS and CMS. So if there are collisions in ATLAS and collisions in CMS, and if they see a Higgs, we should also see a Higgs, right? So just to show you some little pictures of my Karam Bhumi here, as you can see, that's where I work. That's the CMS experiment. And as you see, these are the layers of the onion. I will not go in detail here, but of course there can be questions later on. And as you see here, this is underground. So these big pieces that each one of them weighs around 2,000 tons, like 700 elephants, that is lowered from the shaft above, and even the crane technologies had to be devised to be able to do this. And those crane operating companies are building stadia in various places like football stadium and so on. And they then use this technique that they have invented here to lower the pieces of CMS in those places. That's me underground with my favorite detector, which has been recently installed. This is on October last year, and that's my favorite detector. That's the GEM detector. Of course, I would love to speak about it, but I think it's not the time. You can always just take a look and you will find it. Of course, then we come to the data challenge. So we made the detectors, we can take pictures. Now, what about the data? If we collect the data, right? We were expecting that we will get 15 million gigabytes of data per year. But what we find is that we have something like 70, 80 petabytes of data only from LHC per year. And this has been an incredible challenge. So the way it was resolved was by grid computing. And grid computing means that all computers in the world, or at least on the collaboration, they can be talking to each other, and we can use the CPUs of each other, and we will be able to solve our challenges. However, we have to now move faster, as you know, and we are now moving to GPU era, as many of you might know, and we are preparing for exabytes of data. That's how collisions look like, and you can imagine if you have to pick out one decay out of, or one particle decay, yes, out of all these, it's quite a challenge. So we also use artificial neural networks, we use machine learning tools, and these are really the birthplace of the algorithms that are then used in the outside world, like banking, like risk analysis, and also dispensing for gasoline and things like that. And indeed, there were collisions that helped us to eventually find a Higgs. And by now we are of course producing a lot of Higgs. Now it's become something that we call a Higgs machine. But in summer 2012, there was a little blip that was found in both ATLAS and in CMS. This may not mean much to many of us. However, if we look very, very carefully, these are the pictures that are uploaded on the site of, I will just come to that. So on the 4th of July in 2012, there was the official announcement of the discovery of a Higgs-like boson particle, which has a mass of 125, 126 GeV by both these experiments. So there was a seminar where I got a spot only outside the door, even though I came up at 5 o'clock in the morning, but it was a pity because it was completely full. Nevertheless, this was announced and it was followed live all around the world, particularly in Melbourne, where there was a big conference going on and this was announced. And indeed, the whole world was looking at this discovery of a new particle. Is it real? And in fact, by Tuesday, 8th of October 2013, it was established that this was a Higgs boson, and Francois Englert and Peter Higgs got the Nobel Prize for this discovery. And down here you see our Director General, Professor Rolf Heuer, addressing CMS and ATLAS collaboration and congratulating them for this discovery. And then in December, the Nobel Prize was awarded jointly to Francois Englert and Peter Higgs for the theoretical discovery of a mechanism that contributes to our understanding of the origin of the mass of subatomic particles. which was confirmed through the discovery by Atlas and CMS at CERN's Large Hadron Collider. So you see how important instruments, equipment, engineering, everything had to come together. Computing, all these things had to come together to be able to corroborate what was predicted in 1964. So the future for us is in studying the Higgs. We need to understand, we need to continue to understand what are the answers. And of course, there are many, many questions and so on. So we are looking at those. So now we come to understanding how particle physics has been interlinked with key technological spin-offs and also for innovation. By now, you know that we have now an expertise, we meaning all people who work together. This is not only me. Please be assured that I am but a very, very tiny, minuscule cog in this whole big collaborative exercise that is particle physics. So we have accelerating beam particle beams in the tunnels. This tunnel is 27 kilometers in circumference. We have the expertise of detecting particles, the radiation, and we have, of course, a large-scale computing facilities and algorithms. So one use, a very immediate use you can see is about when we combine all these things together, because we know how matter interacts with the body, how it interacts with the bones, how it interacts with the tissues, how it interacts with cancers and tumors and so on. So these have been transformed into therapy for fighting cancers. You can imagine that there are 30,000 accelerators worldwide and 17,000 of them are used for medicine. And there are 100,000 patients that are treated worldwide in 45 facilities, where 50,000 are treated in Europe. And it is a bit unfortunate that in India, we do not have this kind of facility. Nevertheless, it will come eventually, I'm sure. Similarly, using the detection of the particles, that can be used for imaging. And there are many, many examples. You can see PET scanners and how many, many diseases can be studied by in vivo imaging using the techniques that I have just described to you. Looking at the space station now, looking above, going from the Earth, you see that in the space station as well, we have our detectors that are helping astronauts, cosmonauts to understand radiation effects. And you see here, there is a logo of CERN and there is a CERN detector sitting right in the cockpit, measuring the radiation that this guy is actually undergoing. Now, in the CMS onion, as I mentioned, there is something called a pixel detector. It's made out of silicon and it has many, many layers. You can see them here. And it was crucial to identifying the Higgs boson decay in the CMS experiment. And when we use that to make an image of a beautiful flower, you can see how beautifully the same technology can give you a contrast, high contrast image of a flower, right? Using similar techniques, you can see this is a rodent and you can actually see the bones, the flesh, the pieces of the inside of this rodent. I'm sorry, I do not know too much about the biology, but if there is a disease, it can be very well identified. Now look at this. Many of you may have seen it in the news, which came out, I think, about a year ago, and it is the most Googled picture of CERN after the World Wide Web. Oh no, after the Higgs boson, sorry. Yeah. So you see, these are, oh, there we go. 40 million times on Twitter, highest number of hits on CERN website since the Higgs announcement, right? So this is just to show you how these techniques can aid clinicians and doctors to be able to see very clearly inside the body using all these techniques. Dose rates, I mentioned to you already, looking at the doses that we all undergo when we take a flight, we all get some doses of radiation. So those calculations can be done very well and they are actually in use, and the pilots have a minimum time or a maximum time that they can fly in 1 year. So those kind of safety measures have been given or stated because of our experiments, in fact. So talking about the WWW, you know, the World Wide Web, I think it's a tool without which we would not be here today. you would not be always in communication with your family, friends, teachers, educators, and so on. So we know that WWW has been an incredibly impactful spin-off that has come out from CERN. And for example, if you click here, you will immediately go to seeing the whole world, what's happening for the coronavirus. And you can immediately connect the statistics, the kind of people, age group, women, men, this, that, and the amount of aids data is providing in terms of treatment that are then also gone in terms of policies, how to deal with the pandemic. These are the kind of impact that we cannot imagine. And this is Sir Tim Berners-Lee. He was 23-year-old when he proposed to CERN, to his group leader, that I might have a protocol by which we can connect computers in different locations. And his boss said, it's vague but exciting, and see what happened to the world after he did that, right? Now, looking at computing, because simply looking at cures, we need to have a lot of simulations. We need to have very, very memory-hungry simulations. For that, grid computing has been completely employed, not only for bioinformatics, but for weather forecasting, for education and training, for, of course, in India particularly, as you know, the monsoons, the floods, the cyclones, all these things, they are very challenging in terms of human lives and economic disasters. So very accurate weather forecasting has been feasible once the grid computing has been introduced. And nowadays, pretty much to within 10 minutes, I think, we are able to predict the weather. Radiation management, I have mentioned already. Space exploration continues, and so many experiments are going on. This is just a flash to show you many, many experiments that are going on with CERN and its technologies. This is a lady who was a student at CERN recently. You see the date here is 16th June 2020. And she came here for a short period. She did some work over here, and she saw the kind of algorithms that we are creating. And she made an app just to track your fertility and COVID-19, because you can track the temperature of the body, isn't it? And if you have an app by which you can track the temperature, there you go. And in India also, there has been so much of revolution in terms of the ideas, the innovation that are coming out. I mean, we have now toaster-sized ventilators that are going on trials, in fact. Sorry for this line, it's in the wrong place. I just wanted to say that India has 40,000 ventilators at present. And you can imagine the numbers that are needed. And in Europe, for example, there was a situation when the hospitals were completely choked and they had to literally choose whom to save and whom not to save. So in India, this could have become a catastrophe, but there is a lot of innovation that is going on. In particular, I would like to mention one ventilator story, which is called the high energy ventilator. I am also involved in it. And this is a fantastic tool that is based on all the, the expertise gained over the decades of handling gas pressures, gases, cooling, and all the pneumatics that goes on at CERN in the engineering sector, and all that put together has come out with this fantastic ventilator to combat COVID-19. And presently it is being tested in the hospitals. Up to now it was done by simulators. Now we move to hospitals. And of course we will have to go through the regulatory mechanism so that then it can be offered to hospitals everywhere. So if any one of you is interested to join in this venture, please get in touch with me. All right. Another aspect of the collaboration of these experiments is collaboration, simply because there is no one person here who can say, I did this and I found the Higgs. We cannot do that. We are a part of the community. And from the very first person who got together with another engineer and said, one said, we have to look for the Higgs. Another one said, I want to make a magnet that can go to those temperatures, and so on. So this tight-knit collaboration is why we are successful. And we are successful because we need to work together in teams. We have a group goal, and the group goal, as you see here, this is Peter Higgs, who visited our experiment, and he was very happy, of course, and always came and told us in a joke that I pray to God and my doctors that they keep me alive until the Higgs boson is discovered, right? So this is very important to learn how collaboration and the collaborative spirit with which we work can actually end up in such an impactful let's say way for humankind as such. Of course, the Large Hadron Collider will continue, and just yesterday you may have seen in the news that there is a new collider that has been that will become a focus for CERN in the next 20-40 years, and that's called the Future Collider, Future Circular Collider, which is 100 kilometers in circumference. I will not discuss that. I just want to mention now that all of you are more than welcome to partner and build from Mega Science Blue Sky Research. It's not only about CERN, it's about creating the linkages between what we learn when we do the blue sky research, which are listed here. As you see, there are many, many things. I will not go into details, but in India, we have several mega science projects. CERN is only one of them. There is FAIR, there is BEL, there is STAR, there is Fermilab, there is LIGO, you have heard about it, there is the INO in India, there is the ITER program. And from all these mega science projects, which are essentially blue sky research projects, we need to understand what is the return on investment in terms of human capital, in terms of finances, in terms of time. So we need to know where can we input into our societies, right? So let's look at the science, the technologies, the industries, the engineering, the education, and the outreach, right? So I just like me, when I started, I have to tell you that I was completely lost, completely confused. And anytime I would look at one particular aspect of the experiment, I would be very excited that that's what I want to do. And then a few days later, a few months later, I wanted to do something else. So it's very, very difficult. You know, it's not so simple to just understand how to proceed. So the best thing is that you take part, you start learning, and then you engage. And eventually, I hope that many of you will lead the future mega science projects and then bring a lot of impact to our society. And clearly, young and diverse people are key. And I am personally very, very involved in encouraging the young children. And as you see, up to today, I think we have had nearly 600 students who have come to CERN, if in various small, let's say, capacities, which means a few months or maybe 6 months, or even semester exchanges. We are setting up those kind of things. And then they bring back to their own classrooms in India, where we have been also working with them. I come from Jhansi, just to tell you, I'm one of you. So that's my school here, you know, St. Francis Convent. It used to be called St. Francis Convent High School, but now it's called Inter College. And then eventually I am here. These were my various phases of the career, where I started from the laboratory research, R&Ds, and so on. And now I have been leading part of the experiment, which is called the Muon GEM upgrade. I have brought a new technology, a brand new technology into CMS, and it took me 12 years to literally convince everybody that, yes, this is the way to go, but eventually I was successful. So, you know, believe me that I have gone through, like everyone, like every project, you know, there are difficulties and challenges, but this is what we need to just keep understanding, that we have to keep going and not stop. So yes, I'm very happy. And now my goal, part of my goal is really to transform and impact what I personally, and of course with the teams, with your help together, how we can transform science and education and research in India, really to make a difference. And I can tell you that if I can do it, then anybody can do it. I'm just an average student from the university and just an average person coming out from a small city like Jhansi, right? Now look at this picture here on the right here. when you start with a creative period, you just need an idea and you just need to follow it through. You will go through detector development, you will then execute it in one of the mega science blue sky research projects. You will, if you're lucky, you might end up with a Nobel Prize with a physics discovery. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, you acquire all these skills of machine learning, artificial intelligence, material science, mechanical engineering, electronics, firmware, software, everything. And eventually you become such a package. This skill set is so unique that the value that you have created will just unleash your maximum potential. And that's what is needed. So I hope I have convinced you that blue sky research is absolutely important. We all should care, and it's the coronavirus right now. It is right now it's a known, but it was unknown 6 months ago, correct? So what are the other unknowns that are facing us? And we need to absolutely be prepared for the unknown unknowns. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. It's very, very smooth, and I can say it's extremely smooth lecture, and we all pretty understood these things. So we heard the lecture with full of applications, motivations, etc. So I will request our coordinator, Dr. Budhendra Kumar Singh, to, if you have a questions related to this lecture, please go ahead and ask the speaker.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Ma'am, there is one question from Poonam Jain. She writes, how a nuclear physicist contribute in this project as nuclear energy is of low range in comparison to high energy?
So the question is about energy. So there are experiments like the ITER, that's a very, very incredibly ambitious experiment. Again, there is a learning. So I would say that in India there is an ITER India, and if you have interest in the field, I would encourage you to contact the team and ask them for opportunities and how you can contribute being a nuclear scientist.
Okay. And another question from Yogesh Kumar. He asked, are LHC and FAIR projects are interrelated?
Certainly they are, because FAIR is another version and they are looking at another scope of this Big Bang. Remember the picture that I have shown you? So LHC is looking at the very first few seconds or microseconds of after the Big Bang, and FAIR is looking at about few 100 microseconds after the Big Bang. You see, so they are examining the heavy iron part of the quark gluon plasma, while CMS and Atlas and at CERN, we are looking at a bit higher energies and a bit higher temperatures. Does that make sense?
Okay, ma'am. The next question is, how can we know about dark matter from CERN?
So yes, I mean, dark matter candidate particles could be found because they will also in the end decay into something known, right? That is the premise. So just like the Higgs boson, we did not know the mass, we did not know the properties, but we expected. I mean, let us not ignore all the work that has been done by the theoreticians and the theory, let's say, developments over the last years. In fact, the Higgs boson was a theory in 1960s. Nobody would have believed them at that point. So today as well, just like supersymmetric particles or dark matter particles, we do not know, but then we have theories that tell us that if there was a dark matter particle, what will you observe in CMS, right? So we will be able to look at those signals.
Hello. Yes. Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Yeah. There is one more question from another participant. He asked, what is the role of civil engineers in these projects?
So as you have seen, I don't know if I had that slide or not, but this whole thing is placed in a tunnel which is 27 kilometers, right? There is a tunnel which is 27 kilometers. The diameter is twice the size of the machine, of each of the magnet piece, which then goes down and is able to be turned and goes right in the cavern. All the digging of the tunnel, the preparation of the caverns, the stability of the rocks, and so on, all this is done by a civil engineering group. And you need, I can give you one nice example, that when they were digging the shaft, for CMS, suddenly there was water coming out and the shaft was filled with water. What an engineering challenge! And who will solve it? It will be a civil engineer. Don't ask me how they solved it. But
Yeah. Actually, ma'am, there are few graduate students here after +2. Uh, One of that guy is asking, we have heard that universe is expanding since the Big Bang, but we also say that we don't know the exact boundary of the universe. So how can we so sure that universe is expanding?
well, there have been measurements. I hope that you have seen when you make a cake in the oven, then what happens? If you put some kishmish in the cake, you start with a dough which is like this, and when the cake becomes big, all the raisins go far away. Do you agree? And if you agree, then you know that the galaxies are actually moving and expanding, and those measurements have been done by cosmologists. All right. And then please look at Google up, look at YouTube, look at lectures. There are experts who can give you much better answers also.
And there is one more question from Dr. A.P. Jairam. He asked, he would like to ask you to give some more light on the proposed successor to LHC announced this week.
The FCC. Okay, it is really very fresh off the press yesterday. So I would again encourage you let me just show you immediately. I'm still sharing my screen. Is it correct? Yeah. So if I go to FCC one, so the Future Circular Collider, there we go. And if I look at, so can you see my screen? No.
No, no, ma'am. You have to stop sharing and then share it again.
Okay. Okay, let me just try. Stop. So yes, here is my screen. I think you can see it. Do you see the Future Circular Collider?
Yes.
Okay, so yes, indeed, it is 100 kilometers in circumference. That's the present LHC. The tunnel will have to be made. So again, a big civil engineering challenge. And once that is done, then the readiness is, I think, expected for 2040. Here it is. You see, this is the Future Circular Collider tunnel that looks very futuristic, as you can see. So I would suggest you take a look. I mean, this is really a lot of work, and there is still debate whether it will be electron collider, whether it will be a hadron collider. I think if India had a lot of money, then we could have invested in India and made something intermediate between now and 2040, because CERN has other priorities between now and then. So if we had money, if we had infinite time, infinite money, I would try to do something in India. For example, an E plus E minus collider. So yeah, I mean, there's lots to do, lots to learn, and I think there are many opportunities.
Okay. Ma'am, there are many more questions, but I would like to ask the last one maybe, and rest of the question may be emailed, and then you can answer later.
Sure.
One of the participant is asking, how is there any real existence of dark matter and dark energy?
until proven, this is a theory, and until proven, we might find another state of matter we do not know. So I really can't answer more than that.
Thank you, ma'am. Over to Venkatesh, sir, please.
थैंक यू मैम, बहुत अच्छा लगा सुन करके और आपसे मिल करके इस प्लेटफॉर्म पे। उम्मीद है आप निकट भविष्य में भी मुलाकात हो जल्दी ही, और हम लोग इंडिया में मिलें, और जैसे ही समय मिलता है आपको आमंत्रित करते हैं अपने विश्वविद्यालय आने के लिए, और उम्मीद है आप कोशिश करेंगी और जरूर आएंगी। इन्हीं शब्दों के साथ हम आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद देना चाहते हैं कि आप आई और शेयर की अपने विचार, और अच्छा लगा, बहुत बढ़िया। थैंक यू।
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Namaskar. Thank you everyone. Bye bye. All the best.
नहीं दे रहे हैं, आंसर दीजिए ना।
उनका क्या कुछ हमसे क्या बोलिए?
क्या ट्विंस होता क्यों?
कुछ नहीं है, ये सिर्फ फॉर एग्जांपल है। ये लिखना, ये क्या है? ये क्या है?
बॉल।
तो ये बहुत अधिक लग गया बस। कुछ वो सोने